Hi, good day everyone. Welcome to this next lecture. We're going to look at Unit 3 still today and Chapter 8 of Unit 3. Sorry, I see it just skipped that section there. So we're looking at the principles and rules of cost management on projects. So we're looking at the areas of cost management. So we're going to deal with that.
Ever looked up at a skyscraper and wondered, who built this? An architect? An engineer? A builder? Well, yeah, all of these people play a role in designing and constructing a building. A project like this needs a team of hundreds of people, and like any great team, they need a leader. In fact, a project this huge needs a whole team of leaders. Let me introduce you to a few of them. Let's say a property developer has already selected the site and decided that it's ideal for a brand spanking new skyscraper.
Yeah.
Where do we start? Call in the bulldozers and start preparing the site? Pour the concrete? Hold on, this is a huge project. We need to do a little planning first. So we've appointed Kim as Senior Project Manager, the leader of our team of leaders. Kim's got years of experience in this game. She'll map out the whole process from start to finish. Who else? Well, there's Max, our design manager, who works with the architect and the engineer to design the perfect building. It's got to be beautiful, it's got to be functional, it's got to be really, really tall, and it's got to stay up. Max is pretty important. Without him on board, we could end up with a really dodgy building. Max gives the plans to Jamie, our quantity surveyor. He figures out how much it's all going to cost. It takes a huge pile of cash to build something on this scale. But without Jamie keeping an eye on the bottom line,
How you doing?
it could take a massive pile of cash. Jamie works closely with Steve, the construction scheduler.
Hi.
Steve's job is to figure out how long everything's going to take. Like, if it takes 10 workers 2.5 years to build a 20-storey building, how long will it take 50 workers to build a 120-storey building? Never mind. Let's just say that without Steve it will take a really, really long time. What next? Don't we need some cranes and bulldozers? How about a plumber, painter and an electrician? We sure do. That's why Amy, our contract manager, is organising all the contractors, the people who do all the hands-on stuff.
Hi.
Without Amy, well, not much would happen at all. Now we're ready to get started. Bring on the bulldozers, pour the concrete, and lay the footings. Up go the columns, in go the slabs, on goes the cladding, and that's pretty much it. We just need to connect the utilities, paint a few walls, tile some floors, and voila, one skyscraper delivered right on schedule. That last bit can take quite a while, anywhere between a few months and 2 years actually. But don't worry, Kim was keeping an eye on things the whole time, making sure everyone did their job safely. Without her, who knows where we could have ended up. What do you think? Want to join this exciting team? Perhaps you're cut out for a career in construction management.
So you will see here we go. So everything is working now again. Okay, so Chapter 8, we're going to look at the principles of and the rules of cost management of projects. So you will see there's a little video that I included in this slideshow as well. So we're going to, you're more than welcome to look at that just to get a bit of an idea of how the whole process works for larger projects. So we're going to look at certain areas with regard to design management. So looking at the design management, the project manager should understand the design processes and the design process so that she can have insight into the problems and the complexities. A project manager should understand that yes, the QS should have a certain amount of information before he can actually do a proper cost estimation, and vice versa. So before he can actually give feedback to the design team. So the project manager should always be aware of the cost implications as the design develops. So there's a back and forth of information as you go through the design process, but it's very important that the project manager understands the whole process, and hence the standardization of the different stages of our projects, so that they can understand what is the output of the different role players and how that affects the design and going forward. So the project manager must provide advice in cases where the original needs cannot be met in terms of cost, design and time. So if the design comes back the cost comes back on the design and it's over, you should understand either to advise the client, look, for what you are looking for, this might not be the best project to implement, or we should drastically amend the size of the project or the layout or the functionality of it, maybe changing certain sections of the designs, looking at if you're working on shopping malls, the width of the corridors that you've got, the height of the ceilings and that type of item. So you should have a good idea of how that works. Okay, and then you've got risk management. So in the previous lecture I mentioned that the QS can go into risk management, the project managers as well, because you have a complete picture of the whole process, so ideally suited to go into risk management. But as part of our services, we do provide a certain amount of risk management. So the construction industry inherently is risky and uncertain, because it is a new building each time that we're constructing, so we're not exactly sure what the cost will be. Although we have a good idea, we will not know until right at the end whether our estimations and calculations were correct or not. So risk is measurable and can be considered on projections, like for instance poor ground conditions. If you can identify the risk, you can mitigate that, but there's certain other risks that you cannot get rid of. For instance, if you're working on projects and riots and so on is quite prevalent, then you can't really get rid of those risks, but you can mitigate that by increasing your insurance, etc., etc. And okay, so the project manager has access to the different types of cost data with which he can calculate the budget price limit that falls within certain limitations of certainty. So in our module, we're looking specifically at financial risk. So you should constantly be looking at what the risks are falling within the budgets. Okay, uncertainty is difficult to evaluate, represents unknown happenings. Okay, and then risks can never be eliminated, but can at least be managed instead of being ignored. Okay, so that's one of the services that we render, risk management, especially towards financial risks. And then we also add some value engineering. Value engineering is basically looking at alternatives, looking at possibilities of amendment to the project. So value engineering is the provision of a product that is required by the client and required quality and optimum cost. So it's not necessary always to have all of the nice flashy installations, as long as the client gets what he's looking for. The functionality of the building is the most important thing. Then we get to an organized approach to providing necessary functions at the lowest cost. So we look at the maximum value is achieved when a required level is achieved at the lowest cost, and then we've got the highest level of quality is achieved at a given cost. Okay, getting the optimum finishes. You don't want to install items that you're going to have to replace within a year or two. Value for money is very important. An optimum compromise between the cost and the quality has to be achieved. Okay, value engineering is therefore the management of the process of achieving the maximum value at a rate determined by the client. It is important to identify the primary functions without which the project cannot succeed. Okay, and then value engineering complements project management it just adds a lot of value to the client if you can save the client money on the project. Okay, quality management. Important to define the level of quality for the client. It has to be defined clearly by the client what type of quality he is looking for. There's a choice between scarce, unusual, high achievement materials, a large degree of precision and sophisticated handmade materials, and ordinary, everyday, basic components on the other hand. The main thing is here is if you're doing working with a design, you want to try and stay with standard products that is readily available in the country. You don't want to have imports, which just puts and takes up the cost. And also, for instance, we had a project there in the Northern Cape at Kuala Lodge there in Blackrock, and what happened there was the project had imported tiles from China, and that tiles after we weren't involved with that installation, but we were asked to replace some of the damaged tiles there, but there wasn't any attic stock. So the what happened was we couldn't find alternatives in South Africa, and importing that tiles from overseas just wasn't possible at that stage anymore. So very important to get the best value for money, locally produced items that you can replace later on. It's like buying a car. If you're buying a car, you should be able to service that car with a relative low cost. Okay, yeah, so it's basically you're considering the Rolls-Royce versus a Mini. So which one does the client want? Okay, put systems into place to assure that a specific quality is achieved. Okay, so we're looking for the specific services or systems. So cost information is based on defined presumed standards of quality. Okay, the project manager again keeps an eye on the quality and the cost implications involved. Okay, then money and cost management. So money and cost management is one of the longest sections in the study notes. So the components comprising the total project cost varies from project to project. Okay, self-explanatory. Then the building contrast cost and or contract cost and resource cost is the most important items to look at. So you have your contract cost and your resources is very important items. Okay, and then you've got cost management study makes the use of your plan of works and the criteria of cost reduction to apply alternative materials. Okay, so basically just going through the motions of what materials can we use on the project. Cost planning involves predicting how and when money will be spent in the course of the project. Okay, so going back to your cost management is basically looking at your cash flow and then being able to work out which month will be the biggest challenge for you. Basically working out what your working capital is. If you work on your projects, the contractor will only get his first payment usually after month 2 of the project, and he will always be 2 months behind on what his actual cost usually on site is. So he would have to carry all of that cost until such a time that he gets a positive cash flow on the project. So those are the items that the contractors have to look at. Money is a resource that has to be managed, very important. Again, then cost monitoring is important to ensure funds are available when needed. For example, a cash flow chart. We spoke about this just now, how important the cash flow is. Even though it's very important for the contractor, it's just as important for the client, because if the contractor can't fulfill his obligations, the client will sometimes suffer because of that, because the contractor won't have any cash flow to stay on target with his program. Then the project manager is responsible to keep the client informed about the cash flow position and the project cost and the project and the progress at all times. Okay, so looking at the tender and how it influences this cost management. Persons appointed to manage the contract should be informed of all aspects of the design. The main thing is to be a team player and to involve everyone as fast as possible on the design. It's always best to play open cards with the contractor, because contractors will add a lot of good value on the implementation of the project, whether it's possible or not. Okay, the strictest cost control can only be achieved if the contract is closed with strict documentation conditions, and then the greatest threat to maintaining the effect of cost control during the construction phase is amendments to the original contract by either the design team or the client. Okay, very important to try and keep the amendments to the design to a minimum once you get into construction. Okay, each change must be evaluated not only on the regards to cost, but also to the influence on the project and how it will influence the program. The construction phase is important, as the quality and completion project depends on the type of craftsmanship and management of the construction work. So there's a balance that has to be struck between progress on site and the actual implementation quality of the product. Greatest part of the budget is utilized during the construction phase. Management very important here. So the time required for construction is considerable more than time required for design. Time is very important. Any delay can lead to additional costs for clients and the contractors. Yeah, it's a lose-lose situation. Okay, so looking at contingencies. So including an amount for contingencies should be discussed with the client, and it's always good to include a contingency on your budget, because there's always unforeseens that pop up on any project. For instance, just the groundworks. You never know what's going on underneath the ground. So the main areas which should be that you should allow contingencies for is changes initiated by the client. So the client might change his mind on a paint color, for instance, but when is it changed? Is it changed after the first or the final coat was applied? So now he has to pay double for the paint work that was put on. Contingency for the design phase to cover additional costs that may arise on the project that is still in draft. Okay. Then contingencies for the construction phase, unforeseen problems that might arise. Just to stop at this first one, is usually when you do your estimations, you add a higher contingency if you don't have a lot of information. The more information that's available, the lower your contingencies can be. It is important to determine the amount to allow for contingencies and who will have authority of this expenditure. Okay, we spoke about the percentages in the previous lectures. And then we get to time management. So time management is, as you've seen, very crucial and integral to the cost of the project. So the aim of the project is time within budget and other objectives. So you want to be within your time and within the budget, and if there's other objectives by the client, for instance, getting a green star rating, also getting the added quality, adhering to health and safety requirements, etc. Then it is a process of organizing and implementing a strategy related to the time required for work activities on a project. And then ultimately time is equal to money, especially on construction projects. Then we look at finally at the life cycle cost management. So life cycle cost management is included by using life cost analysis to identify areas that use detailed cost and where cost can be reduced. Looking at how much will this project or this building cost to maintain. So the life cycle cost management can assist the building owners to compare the following: identify effective, less effective uses for the building, identify energy efficiency of the building, identify the difference in maintenance cost between similar buildings, and assist in building maintenance management. Provide clients with tax advice regarding buildings. For instance, if you're operating a building, what type of tax incentives can you have if you're running a business in compared to when you're a homeowner, where tax incentives is not that high. Then finally, the conclusion is to manage a contract successfully, 2 skills are very important: strategic skills, okay, and also skills related to implementation, basically experience and technical skills. Okay, also very important is problem solving by making use of teams and specialists. You will not know everything on a project. We've got a project now that we're busy with, a house here in Baines Vlei, where the ground conditions is very adverse, and we're still early on in the design process. So we're considering at this stage maybe going to a lightweight steel construction to try and mitigate this problem, to see if that will save the client some cost. So very important items to look at is look at the alternatives, ask questions to from the specialists, so that you can make an informed decision on that. Thanks everyone.